Slater, your pick for the most impressive is
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of choices, but honestly, I was in a very basketball mood yesterday, so I watched all the way through to the end, including Clippers Blazers with the late night game. And again, I don't want to go all Fred Katz on you and act like the Clippers are going to win the title because they mashed the Blazers, who are not going to be good. How many points the Clippers put up? By the way, it might have been near 140,
123.
123. Okay, but they look like Russell Westbrook just looks energized by that situation. Everyone's glowing about his leadership. I do think the leadership void, on a team with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, really we underrated what Russell Westbrook's just personality would bring to that franchise.
Plus
And Kawhi's
30, Slater. Plus 30.
yeah,
Damn,
yeah.
Russ.
Go look at his dunks. He probably had 4 or 5 like big ones. He looks athletic
He's
right
trying to
now.
keep James Harden away.
Yeah, he was playing Scoot Henderson, which might have invigorated him because Scoot Henderson, their broadcast was talking about how grew up idolizing Russ. But Kawhi looked sharp. Paul George looked sharp. They're healthy. They're saying the right things about caring about the regular season, right? It does feel a little bit more desperate than it has there. And I just thought, look, again, one game. But I was like, man, they look good. They look good right now.
Man, imagine if they didn't, not to pick on him, but imagine if they didn't play Kenyon Martin Jr. And I obviously didn't watch this game, but 14 minutes, minus 17.
That was just the fourth quarter. They got beat 38-24 in the fourth. They were up like 30 something.
Okay.
When it mattered.
Fred?
There were people with the Clippers last year who, it's funny because, we think of the Clippers on the outside as this organization that isn't prioritizing the regular season, only wants to build for the postseason. They're the load management team, the Kawhi team, all that. At some point, since the Kawhi and Paul George trade, at some point, there are people in that organization who have kind of flipped on that and thought, this locker room's just not competitive enough. And that was a thing last year where like people in that organization were worried that locker room just wasn't competitive enough. And I remember when they got Russ, and I was talking to somebody there, and that person is saying to me, like, Russ has been awesome just because he's so insanely competitive, and we just needed that so badly. I look, there were enough people over there who were talking about a lack of competitiveness within the organization that I believe it probably was true. And
who clearly loves the Westbrook joining the team? Steve Ballmer, right? He's a guy who goes to every regular season game, sits courtside, like lives and dies in the second quarter on like a 10-2 run. And I just think, considering the stars he had who hadn't played in the regular season, the fact that they have a Russell Westbrook who plays every game that he can and like goes as hard as he does, you could tell he just like, the dunks last night, Ballmer's going nutty over there. And it's like, wasn't there the story that Ballmer was one of the first to call Westbrook in free agency and just preach like, hey, we want you back?
I mean, look, for all of his flaws, and he has flaws, and he has more flaws now than he did when I covered him in Oklahoma City, Russ is quite possibly the most competitive human being I've ever met in my entire life. And that can be very helpful when you're a professional athlete. When during his MVP season, 2016-17, Billy Donovan told me this story when he was the coach of the Thunder. They were playing a game. Russ had turned his ankle really bad the previous night in Charlotte. And it was apparently awful. Billy was like, you would not believe the size of his ankle and how swollen it was. And the training staff was telling Russ, you have to sit out. You have to sit out. Like, you're not playing tonight. You're out. Russ was in the training room. Billy heard a commotion in the training room. He goes in the training room and Russ is just yelling, took a piece of like, they took like a roll of tape and threw it against the wall. And he's like, you're going to let me warm up and see how I feel. You're going to let me warm up and see how I feel. And Billy tries to tell him like, Russ, just take the game, just take the one game and we'll see how you feel the next game. He refuses to. He says, you're going to let me warm up and see how I feel. Russ goes through warm-ups. Billy's like, his hurt ankle this is in Houston. He's like, his hurt ankle is twice the size of his other one. He goes through warm-ups. As he's walking off the court, he struts past Billy, looks him in the eye and goes, I'm playing. And then that night he dropped 47. And it's like that dude just wants to play all the time. There is a fire and a competitiveness that's a double-edged sword, 100%. But maybe it's a good culture fit for there. Maybe that's something that can that can help them at times. Also, Paul George has already played with him, and Paul George loves him.
Well, and I think Paul's been one of the people that you alluded to earlier, Fred, that has, even publicly somewhat questioned not necessarily their competitiveness, but the load management approach on his podcast. He's been open about, kind of the way they are perceived and how that doesn't fit with who he is. So, I'm here for that, for them, finding that spirit to actually go out and do something here.